So good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if everyone has woken up. It's very quiet. You just had your coffee. So I have the task of both waking you up and hopefully energizing you with a bit of inspiration. So my name is Ketty Nivyabandi, as they've just said. And as he just outlined, I have several identities, and I really wrestled. So am I going to speak as an activist? He didn't say that I'm a poet as well. Will I speak as an artist, as a poet, as a woman, as a refugee? So many conflicting identities, but they live simultaneously in me, and so I will do my best to speak as all of that and the whole of me. So first of all, welcome to Ottawa. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're such a quiet crowd. You're such a welcome, a very warm welcome to Ottawa. As Enrico just mentioned, we are standing on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and I'm grateful to be here. I am very grateful for the graciousness of the Algonquin, whose land so many of us are now calling home. I am specifically grateful for this today because this is a perfect reminder that at the end of the day, all of us here are migrants. All of us somehow have come from somewhere else. But I think we need we live in sobering times, and we need to sober up. We live in very disorienting times. We live in times where human beings are now categorized into asylum seekers, asylum claimants, protected persons, irregular crossers, illegal migrants, stateless persons, undocumented migrants. It makes my head spin. It really does. And I don't know about you, but for me personally, when I feel disoriented, I try to turn to history to put things into perspective. And really, when you look out at the history of our humanity, the truth, the most simple and ancient truth, is that people have always been on the move, always. Migration is an intrinsic part of our DNA as human beings. People have always moved because they were driven by a desire for a better life for themselves, for their loved ones, or because they were fleeing what endangered their immediate survival. So this is not new. There is nothing new about this, but you know this. And what we are calling a migration and a displacement crisis, this massive movement of people in itself is not the crisis. The crisis is not the reality of people fleeing their homes. The crisis is the reasons that are the burning reasons why they flee in the first place. That is the crisis. The second crisis is what we do when they arrive at our borders. I like to use a very simple image for this. So imagine, I hope you live in a quiet neighborhood. If you don't, try and imagine. But if you do, just imagine your quiet neighborhood right now. Imagine sleeping in your comfortable bed, on your favorite side of the bed. If you're married, your spouse is probably snoring, and you're trying to sleep, but you're at that sweet moment where you're just drifting into deep slumber, when suddenly you are shaken by the screams outside your window. So you get up, you're in your PJs, or you're finding your PJs, you get to the window, you look outside, and what you see is your neighbor's house in flames. your neighborhood, the people that you love, the people that you see every day, the people whose children play with your children, your entire neighborhood is lit by an enormous fire. And suddenly you see your neighbor running out of the house, barely dressed, holding a baby in one arm and another one with the other hand, screaming at the other two children to run, 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 run. Run faster than the flames. And you see them running, you see them screaming, you see the entire neighborhood running. In that moment, at that window, when you're seeing this image, when you're seeing the speed at which these people are running, you'd never think for a second that their running is an issue. Never do you see that as a problem. You instinctively know and understand that the running is not the problem, but a basic human survival reaction that has kicked in because of a real problem in this case, and that is the house burning. And if this family arrives at your door, the family that you have seen, desperate, running, trying to survive, if they arrive at your front door and they knock frantically, screaming for help, and you keep your door shut, who is the crisis? Is the crisis the people outside the door or the people inside the house? I say this because the way we frame stories and the way we frame narratives, specifically narratives around displacement, matters. It matters enormously. The real crisis that we are facing today is a crisis of global governance. It's a crisis of an international system that has failed our people globally. It's a deficit of humanity in our domestic migration policies. Or to go back to the house burning analogy, the real crisis on one hand is why the houses are burning. So if this is one house burning, maybe it's an incident that can occur. But if you see houses burning one after another, you're not going to keep focusing on the running. You have to focus on what's causing these houses to burn. So on one hand, that is the issue. And the other hand, it's how we welcome, or rather how we unwelcome our neighbors when they flee to our houses. So I want to argue and I want to emphasize that which I think all of us know deep down, but don't talk sufficiently about. And that's the fact that we have a crisis, a global crisis of empathy. We have a crisis of equity, a crisis of compassion, a crisis of global injustice. In my language, Kirundi, we have a word that encompasses all these values into one. You know, we're that wise. We call it ubuntu. As ubuntu is the core belief that my well-being is intimately linked with the well-being of my neighbor. It's this understanding that the human in me also lives in you. And this core concept was actually used by our people in our traditional societies before we were disrupted by colonization and many other things. This was used as a benchmark to actually evaluate decision makers in our worlds, in our communities. And a decision maker or a leader who lacked ubuntu was seen as the ultimate calamity, a catastrophe. because our people understood that the risk of having a leader or a decision maker or someone in a position of power who doesn't have that basic human characteristic, the danger would be that this would spread into policy and into ordinary people's lives, that inhumanity would become a culture. I think a lot about this when I read the news today, as I'm sure all of you do, when we are now in a world where children can be locked, separated from their parents, and locked without even the most basic necessities. When I see the people that I left behind and who are still struggling so hard in refugee camps to make a basic survival for themselves and for their families. So despite all the great work that most of you in this room are engaged in today, and I am really in awe of all of you and everything that you do, but the reality is that we as a civilization are growing increasingly inhumane. And I really say this with profound respect, not only for you, but also for this beautiful country, which has opened its arms to me and which has created an environment where it's possible for me, a refugee woman who arrived less than 4 years ago, to be standing on this stage and speaking to you today. It has made it possible for refugees to be heard and to be seen. I say this with the realization that although I am standing before you, my story is just one in a million, and that the vast majority of displaced people are not here. They are not in this room. I do not see them. They are in refugee camps. They are trying to survive, sometimes in urban centers. The majority of them are increasingly moving to the urban centers because there is no life to be looking forward to in refugee camps. And most of them are in the southern capitals of the world, which are already impoverished, already stretched. Most of them are in Turkey, Bangladesh, Tanzania, Uganda, and the sort. These are the voiceless, the invisible, the wretched of the earth, as Fanon called them. But there really is no such thing as the voiceless. As another writer, Arundhati Roy, so well says, there are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. Je vais vous lire juste un petit extrait de ce texte que je vous recommande énormément. Patrick Chamoiseau, qui est un grand auteur martiniquais, qui a écrit Frères migrants. Pour ceux qui parlent français, je vous le recommande vivement. Et il dit ceci vers la fin de son ouvrage: c'est la nuit puissante qui oblige à une aube puissante. C'est la nuit puissante qui offre le prisme d'un soleil d'égale intensité aux images déclenchées par la plus petite lueur. Oui, mes chers, vous avez raison, ne pas baisser la tête, ne pas fermer les yeux, ne pas différer le désir, fixer plus que jamais l'obscur en déclenchant pour soi, en inventant pour vous des virgules de lumière. Aucune douleur n'a de frontières, aucune douleur ne demeure orpheline. We've just celebrated World Refugee Day, and we are now at over 70 million people on the run in the world. It's a staggering and sobering number of real-life stories, real loss, stories like mine, and far worse. It's a number that is only rising, and it requires us to pause, to reflect, because whatever we are doing is not enough and it is not working. Again, I don't want to dismiss the incredible work so many of you do daily, but my intention is to provoke us all, including myself, to challenge what we do and to challenge the narratives that are dominant around us, because narratives do matter deeply. As a refugee, as a woman, as a mother, as an African woman, as an advocate, as an artist, as an activist, the power of stereotypes and false discourses is very personal to me. It's something that I have experienced and continue to push against. And one of the first stereotypes that I have encountered and that continues to be shared is that of the refugee woman. The refugee woman as a helpless victim. But we are anything but that. And those of you who work with refugee women know this. We are anything but silent victims. Everywhere we go, we brave the cruel winds of displacements, our heads held high. In fact, we are the ones who are the first responders in conflict. We're the ones who shield our children from safety, as I have done here in Canada. We are the ones who organize access to food and shelter in refugee camps, so in the harshest environments. We are the ones who speak up when our communities are in danger. In the DRC, for instance, women have been tear gassed in a refugee camp for protesting against unequal access to food. We are the first ones to get up and find new sources of livelihood, opening small businesses, selling anything on the camps to find a livelihood, while our men sometimes are absent or still grieving the loss of their belongings. We never sit idly. You will always find a woman responding to a crisis the best way she knows how, making the most of her scarce resources. So we are not passive victims. That is the greatest stereotype. We are leaders in every way. The question instead is whether the world sees us this way, whether the world meets our power, our resilience, our courage. So many, unfortunately, so many international development agencies, the media, and many others continue to perpetrate that myth of a helpless woman, of a vulnerable woman who needs to be saved. But instead, we ought to ask ourselves what we can do to meet her resilience. How are we supporting her? Is her voice heard? Is she leading the conversation on how to transform the response to displacement? Does she participate in camp meetings? But not just camp meetings. To be honest, I think, and I'm looking forward to a UN Secretary General who's a refugee woman or former refugee woman. UNHCR should be led by a former refugee woman or by a refugee woman. Who else knows this better than her? So no. The refugee woman does not need to be saved. She just needs the hurdles that are put on her way to be moved out so that she can shine and rise and exercise the power that she has always had inside her. And I see this all the time. I see this all the time. I visited refugee camps, and I have relatives who are refugees who continue to live in these circumstances. They are doing extraordinary work. Just last week, I was with a Rohingya woman who is responding to the Rohingya crisis. She herself is doing more work than any international development agency. The work that she's doing in her camp, providing solutions that her people truly need, and not just a basic list of supplies, because she does it from her intimate knowledge of her community. So we need to be able to rise to these women. The other stereotype, and I'll just stick to those two, is that refugees come from war-torn, very poor, undemocratic countries which are really unable to manage themselves. And as Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who some of you may know, I hope you know her, and has made a beautiful talk about the danger of the single story, she argues so well that the single story's problem is not that it's false, it's that it's incomplete. What we are not saying about these countries where these people are fleeing from are the factors that are contributing to those wars occurring. So we talk about people coming from war-torn countries And we talk about this every day. We share that narrative all the time on our television screens. And then we wonder why people panic when these people from those forsaken countries come to their doors. They're worried. These are the unmanageable people who can't manage. They're coming to mess up our country. So we have to link the narratives that we share and how they impact or how they propel populism. To tell the full story, we need to talk about the arms trade, the war industry that is fueling those conflicts. And to what extent the host countries in the north are responsible in that industry. We need to hold everybody accountable for their role in an increasing number of conflicts and growing inequalities around the world. Some countries cannot keep contributing to these things and at the same time saying, we are not taking in refugees. You cannot say as a leader that you are anti-refugees, that you want to settle the refugee crisis, and at the same time threaten to go to war and create new wars. Because wars are what create refugees. That should be obvious. If you're anti-refugees, at least be anti-war, right? No, really, wars do not just happen in a vacuum, and neither does poverty. Both are constructed, and we need to ask those questions. We need to reform the narrative, not just on refugees, but also on the countries they come from. Quelle cruelle ironie de dire, en effet, à ceux dont on a violé les frontières, ceux que l'on a dépossédés de leurs terres, de leurs espaces de vie, dans tous les sens de ce terme, ceux dont on pille encore les ressources aujourd'hui, ceux à qui on distribue les pires armes, ceux dont on a détruit les écosystèmes, ceux que l'on enchaîne dans les lianes mondiales de l'inégalité. Quelle cruelle ironie de leur dire qu'ici, ils ne peuvent vivre. Quelle cruelle ironie de tracer des limites à leur espérance, à leur refuser le droit fondamentalement humain à émigrer, qui est tout simplement le droit à la liberté. En réalité, le flux incessant de réfugiés et de migrants, il révèle les pays hôtes à eux-mêmes. Les réfugiés ne sont que le miroir des sociétés auxquelles ils essayent d'accéder. Ils révèlent leurs contradictions profondes de sociétés qui se disent civilisées. Je pense sincèrement que la migration est le test contemporain de notre civilisation. Peut-on parler de civilisation lorsque des êtres humains sont enfermés sur des îles, coupés du monde, lorsque les enfants sont séparés de leurs parents, emprisonnés pour avoir osé chercher un autre avenir, lorsqu'on emprisonne des êtres humains pour en avoir sauvé d'autres de la noyade en Méditerranée, essayant d'arriver sur les rivages de l'espérance? Alors l'époque que nous vivons nous appelle à beaucoup plus que de la logistique, beaucoup plus que de l'innovation technique, que des applications dans la gestion de nouveaux arrivants. Elle nous appelle à une réforme de fond. Et je suis vraiment celle qui croit que d'ici quelques siècles, si notre espèce est toujours en vie, évidemment, parce qu'on a un autre défi qui est le changement climatique, l'humanité retiendra de nous la tragédie des migrations contemporaines. Je pense qu'on les regardera avec le même regard que nous portons sur l'esclavage, sur la colonisation, sur les grands génocides de l'histoire, sur la décimation des peuples amérindiens. Alors c'est avec tout ça, tout ce bagage, que mon ambition, mon unique ambition aujourd'hui est de vous appeler à l'urgence de notre mission commune. So what's the way forward? You're going to tell me, but we're not politicians. We know this. It's politicians' fault. They have to fix the world. No, we all have to fix the world. We all have to fix this. We all have a role to play. And I want to, as I wrap up, I just want to leave you with 3 ideas. Because we I don't pretend to have all the answers. I just want to give you 3 pistes, comme on dit en français, to reflect upon and to maybe guide you in your future conversations. Number 1, and this is probably why I think they invited me as a poet. Number 1, I think you're going to need imagination. A lot of imagination, a lot of creativity, because we cannot resolve the current problem that we have at the level that we are doing. We are going to need to go beyond, to be bold, to be ambitious, and to be hugely creative, to think outside of the box. Number 2, and this is a key word I've been saying, you're going to need to be led by women. We need a feminist approach to displacement and to migration. And we need it now. Only when we let those who are most affected by this crisis, by this pain, because it is a pain, only when we let ourselves be led by those will we be able to find solutions that are meaningful, that are truthful, and that are effective. And women are already doing that. So we need to get on board. And I hope the next Metropolis is focused on a feminist approach to migration and displacement. There you go. I gave you a theme. And lastly, I want to say that we're going to need to do this with a sense of extreme urgency. The same urgency, remember the image that I gave you at the beginning of the family running like they have never run before? This is the energy and the urgency that needs to drive each one of us daily. This isn't just a job. You cannot say, oh, hi, I work in banking, I work in migration. And no, it is more than a job. It is a mission, it is a calling. If you are doing this work today, at this moment in the history of the world, when never before in the history of mankind have we been tested this much, and you are the ones who are in these positions, we need to take a moment and reflect on the privilege that you have, the power that you have, and let that infuse everything that you do. It has to be more than work. You must discuss it with your family members, with the people around you. You have to do it as though the flames are at your feet and you're running for your life, because this is the reality of 71 million people around the world. So I'm going to end by thanking you so much. Qui aime bien châtie bien, as we say in French. I provoked you because I know how much we can do. Yes, we are faced with a challenge, but it is not an unsurmountable challenge. We have all the tools in us and around us and between us to solve this challenge. But we just need to push ourselves to go beyond. And I thank you. I thank you for the work that you do every day. I thank you because I know that you face barriers in your daily interactions, either in your own bureaucracies or in the environments you work in, or with the crises that you're facing. So thank you. Thank you. I honor you. I'm also thankful to the organizers of this event for inviting me, but also through my invitation, inviting those who are impacted by this to be able to speak with you. And so I wish you the very best. I wish you courage. I wish you discernment, insight. I wish you passion. Don't just be policy people, be passionate policy people. And I wish you wisdom above anything else. This work requires wisdom. So may whatever force you believe as a supreme force be with you keep you, protect you, inspire you, and may it lead you to bring the change that we so desperately need in the world today. Thank you.